Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wheel to Wheel podcast brought to you by AbsoluteMotorsport.com and Alloy TV. I'm Joshua Till, and joining me today is James Casey and James Baker. We're going to be discussing the F1 2018 season so far. It's been a while since the last episode. I think China was the last one. We've had a fair bit of action since then. The championship looks quite different as well. We've got Lewis Hamilton leading by 14 points ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Danny Ricciardo is in third with a couple of wins, and it's Valtteri Bottas in fourth, followed by Raikkonen and Verstappen. He rounds out the top six. And yeah, quite a lot of change since China, guys, and Hamilton is the one leading the way.
Yeah, so obviously it's been a season that's changed quite a lot race to race, and I think Hamilton, as what he's done is he's found that consistency in terms of finishing on the podium and top fives, which is what Vettel just hasn't quite done. Obviously, with that problem that he had in China, where he was taken out, which wasn't his fault, obviously, and then he's had a couple of little mistakes. Obviously, when Paul Ricard as well, having contact with Bottas. So I think that's why Hamilton's ahead. But in terms of performance, I think they're very, very close.
Baker, what do you make of this kind of fight and kind of where that Mercedes car is at the moment? Obviously, that new engine upgrade in France in Paul Ricard, that seemed to really work for them. And do you think that's maybe given them a slight edge over Ferrari now, or is that kind of track specific?
Um, I think definitely it's given them a slight advantage. I mean, it's very pendant, I think, on how the coming races are for them. I mean, because that will kind of determine whether it's track specific or not. But a lot of people going into France thought Mercedes would, probably walk it. To be honest, they looked pretty good. So prior to that in where were we? Canada. So. Yeah, I think it's just let's just see how it goes over this mid-course of the season, because this is, of course, like the biggest point of any of the engines. So this is probably like the one time where we're going to see drastic changes, I would have thought.
Yeah, and of course, a triple header as well. That's going to kind of, I think, definitely change this championship around. Austria and Silverstone up next. James Casey, who do you see getting an advantage in both Austria and in Silverstone? Is it going to favour Hamilton or is it going to favour Vettel?
Well, yeah. I mean, previously you would say that Britain would obviously be a stronghold for Hamilton. Won 4 races in a row now, isn't he? But we said the same in Canada when they went there and they said, "Oh, that's a certain Hamilton victory," but he was absolutely nowhere there. So I think that the form book's kind of been ripped up a little bit this season, but it'll be interesting to see as we go along whether this kind of in the past, obviously, it was power tracks for suit Mercedes. Whether this kind of comes back into play now with Mercedes moving forward engine-wise, can they maybe leave Ferrari behind on that and go back to being strong where they used to be? But I'm not so sure. It's really hard to tell. But I'm thinking it's going to be pretty even over the next couple of rounds, which is obviously coming thick and fast.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a crucial time for the championship. And let's talk a little bit about their teammates as well, Bottas and Raikkonen. They're fourth and fifth. And Baker, possibly Bottas being one of the kind of, his kind of points tally doesn't really match just how good he's been driving this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Bottas is probably the most unlucky so far this season. That's what he's definitely been called as so far this season. He's pretty much, nothing seems to have gone his way as of yet. I want to see that changing. Austria traditionally, again, is, I think, more of a Mercedes track than Ferrari or Red Bull. So, I mean, he took a win last year. So, hopefully he improves. As for Raikkonen, well, he's just doing the job he's been doing at Ferrari since 2014. That is scoring points, scoring podiums, but not really setting the world alight. Seems a bit average. Qualifying seems to be very much his weak link, as well as the first laps. He hasn't made a place up on the grid on the opening lap of a race this season, which is kind of shocking. But yeah, qualifying for him needs to drastically, I think, step up a bit, because he just looks like he bowls every lap that he needs to perform in.
Rumours about Leclerc replacing him for next year. Casey, do you think this is finally it for Raikkonen?
I would say yes, personally. I think you'd be silly to ignore Leclerc, because he's doing a really good job in a Sauber that is improving, but it's still not really there. And he's doing a fantastic job at the moment. And I do agree that Raikkonen is starting to lose his edge in terms of that qualifying and those starts. he's never really going to be able to play good supporting role to Vettel if he can't qualify and he can't start well, because then he's just out of position. So personally, yeah, I would definitely change that, and I think it will happen as well. But you can never underestimate Ferrari's admiration for the status quo, shall we say.
A lot of speculation kind of surrounding Ricciardo, and talking of the status quo, his team Red Bull have broken that, and they've gone with Honda engines for next year. Do you think this is the right decision, Baker?
It's a bit of a weird one, really, because Honda themselves aren't currently in a really bad way. Like, actually, Toro Rosso don't look awful. Definitely not as bad as what people were predicting them to be at the start of this season. Reliability doesn't look awful either. Probably as good as Renault, if not better. But I don't know what Honda potentially brings. I mean, I'm only looking off top. I mean, this is speed trap I'm only looking at here, but Toro Rosso are one of the quickest in the speed trap with a Honda engine. And to be honest, there's a weak link in a Red Bull car. It's as simple as if they had a bit of straight line, maybe they'd be a little bit closer to those guys ahead. Bit of a tough one to call, though.
Yeah, what do you make of it, Casey, in terms of Ricciardo's future as well? You know, does this kind of affect that?
I think had they made an early decision, it could have changed it quite a bit. But they've played it nicely in terms that they haven't rushed into it. They've seen how Honda have been progressing with Toro Rosso, and even though the Honda engine is still not there with Ferrari and the Mercedes, you could say that it's at least very close to the Renault power unit. So it's not a big gamble, and I don't think that Ricciardo, it will affect his decision too much. And to be honest with Ricciardo, I think that it's going to be more of he's just going to be locked in by not having other opportunities, because I don't think that the other teams are going to want to have two really top drivers in their team. They're going to want to keep Ricciardo out of it. So I think that he probably will end up staying with Red Bull. And I think the Honda call is probably one long term, which will work nicely, and it's not too much of a hit anymore in the short term.
Yeah, and it's only 2 years as well, of course, till we get the new regulations. So obviously an opportunity there for them to kind of bring in someone else if they wanted, or even could possibly favour Honda, those new regulations. Renault and McLaren, they've been kind of apparently in talks with Ricciardo, or at least are interested in signing him. They're leading the kind of midfield charge this year. Renault is fourth, and I guess best of the rest. But McLaren have been having a pretty miserable time of it recently. 3 non-points finishes in a row for the team. Baker, what's going on, McLaren?
Yeah, what is going on? Start of the year, it looked so promising. I don't really know what's going on, to be honest. It almost, if I'm going to put my finger on it, it would probably be, I mean, this is kind of annoying on his part, but Alonso himself does not look happy. It's not even that he doesn't look happy. It just, you get that sense and feeling that he just doesn't want to be here. It's not helping anybody. It's not helping himself. It's not helping the team. Definitely not helping his teammate at the moment either. But really, as a team at the moment, McLaren have just looked pretty shambolic. There's nothing that seems to be going their way. Renault have just outclassed them, really. A lot of the midfield teams, you could say, have outclassed them, but McLaren need to step up or find something, because this is, this could be not as bad as last year. You can't really get as bad as that, but they just need to step it up a little bit now, get those points finishes, and hopefully they'll be the right end of the spectrum.
And Katie, what have you made of the kind of fight at Renault as well? We had Hulkenberg kind of on top at the start of the year, but recently it looks like Sainz is coming, more into his own. Was on for pretty much sixth place in Paul Ricard before that kind of failure. So, a bit of a change in fortunes for Sainz.
Yeah, and I think he's really starting to bed in at that team now, and I think it's helped by this fact that it looks now, with the kind of Red Bull moving to the Honda engines and everything, it looks like he's now got a long-term future at Renault. And I think that's helped his mentality. That could be a load of rubbish, but that could be just something that now he knows that he might be there long-term. That's helping him really bed in the team, and yeah, he's improved his results. He's really consistent at the moment. Points in every race apart from Bahrain, where he's 11th. And Hulkenberg's just slipped up a little bit with a couple of retirements. Obviously, he had that crash in Baku as well. And maybe that's knocked his confidence a little bit and allowed Sainz to get back in there. But still, a really tight battle between those two. And that can only be good for a midfield team like Renault, because they want their drivers to be at their maximum. and if they're pushing each other, that's going to happen really well. So a much better situation, shall we say, than last season when Palmer was not really pushing Hulkenberg.
Yeah, they've got two real kind of consistent point scorers there in Sainz and Hulkenberg. We'll see what they can do for the rest of the season. I think good for Renault as well, but Red Bull are moving away from using their engines. It means that Renault, can be the leading Renault powered team next year, and that would have, possibly prevented them from, winning championships really, because even if they have the best engine, Red Bull are probably going to produce a better chassis. So I think good news that for Renault, but just looks pretty bad for McLaren. Especially compared to the Works Renault team. McLaren now saying that they want to, they can only win as a Works team, but, they've left Honda now, so not a good situation for them. I don't know really how to rate Force India's season. 28 points for them so far. They're, sixth in the championship. Casey, how have you kind of assessed Force India's season so far? One podium, but quite a lot of non-finishes or non-points finishes.
Yeah, they had that really slow start to the season. The first 3 rounds was not good at all. And they've picked it up from there, but they're just struggling to get the cars through a race without problems, which is what we're seeing a lot. A lot of strategic errors, like we saw in Canada when Ocon lost 6th or 7th and ended up at the low end of the points. And they've just struggled to get the results together. But I think that there is a car there that is improving. They've just got to show it really and put a whole race together. And I think considering that they have lost a lot of points through errors and a little bit of bad luck as well, I think they can be reasonably satisfied that they're still sort of in that fight, still for best of the rest, if they can pick up their season a little bit.
And Baker, are you surprised that they're ahead of Haas, considering how quick that car has been on occasion?
Yeah, I think, I don't know where it goes against, but it's just consistency. I think, really, Force India, that's probably the only reason they're ahead of Haas. Really, I'm not sure as to why Grosjean has been performing the way he has. It's not looked great on him. It's not really looked too great on the team, especially when Magnussen is outperforming, outclassing him. Magnussen has this is probably his best season in the sport by a country mile at the moment. He actually looks quite good, as much as he can be a very aggressive racer. A lot of people want to see that. I don't know. It's kind of good news for Force India. They're still it's very good news that they're still ahead of Haas, but I'm sure it will come good eventually for Grosjean. It just needs to come now, really. Austria is a good starting point for Haas. They didn't look too bad around there last season, but we can't keep comparing to last season, so hopefully they can pick it up, and let's see where at least Grosjean and what he can do over these next few races.
Yeah, definitely. Still with no points to his name. Magnussen has 27 now, so Sirotkin is the only other driver not to score a point this year. So I think there's pressure on Grosjean, especially. This is kind of silly season time as well, so crunch time for Grosjean. Toro Rosso, of course, Honda engines this year, and they've been, very up and down, haven't they, Casey? It's been kind of difficult to really judge where they are, and I guess the same can be said of their drivers, Gasly and Hartley too.
Yeah, I think that it's really hard to judge where they are, because they'll go from right at the back to top of the midfield, and it's really hard to tell. Hartley's underperforming massively, let's be honest. He's another driver who really he's just struggled to put a whole race weekend together, and that's really affecting him badly. I think there is a lot more potential in him than he's showing. And Gasly, I'm not sure. I'm surprised he hasn't scored more points, really, but I suppose that shows the inconsistency of the car. That 7th place in Monaco is actually the only real big chunk of points Toro Rosso have scored since the big finish in Bahrain, where they came 4th. So they'll just want to hook the car up more often, Toro Rosso, but I think that they are getting there. But it is hard to tell. I'm not exactly sure where they are still.
Yeah, unfortunately, this kind of Hartley season reminds me a lot of Palmer last year. You know they're not a bad driver, but sometimes it just miles off the teammate, and sometimes, especially the last few races, he just hasn't had a single clean weekend. Something's gone wrong, not always his fault, but just hasn't really got the opportunity to shine. So we've heard rumours about him being replaced, but it sounds like that's all kind of gone to bed for now. So a good chance for Hartley to crack on and hopefully turn his season around. Sauber have definitely turned their fortunes around compared to last year. Solid, another step for them this year. Plenty of points finishes for Leclerc, one for Ericsson. So Baker, I think a pretty decent season for Sauber.
Yeah, I think more decent on one side of the garage compared to the other. I mean, I'm no Ericsson fan, as we've discussed before, but Leclerc is a sensation. That guy is just unbelievable. I think people need to appreciate the way he drives the car as much as anybody else. Like it's a totally different car, and let's get over that. But the way you compare almost him to Stroll, it's just how they've come into the sport and how they've taken it. Stroll looking a bit edgy. Leclerc, though, I mean, I think the rumours with him and Ferrari is going to obviously boost his confidence. He has come out and said that, look, I want to do a job here at Sauber. Let's see how it goes. And, he's not kind of roaming around the point that he could be at Ferrari next season. It's a very exciting proposition. But are Ferrari going to take that risk? There is obviously, like we discussed, there is a risk with them taking Leclerc. They know what they're going to get with Raikkonen, but do they want to venture out and try someone like Leclerc? I would personally go for it, but is it too quick? Is it too early? I think that's all the questions. Ericsson as well, I'm still very sceptical on, seeing the way that this could just be talent from Leclerc, because it's just, I'm going to keep going on and just praising him, but it's not looking good on Ericsson's part at the moment. You can almost call those two a very similar situation, what's going on at Toro Rosso, where very much one side of the garage is going to be a lot happier than the other in terms of Gasly and Hartley. It's obviously more so to Gasly. So, there just needs to be a little bit of a step up from Ericsson. But to be fair to him, he's not been as bad as what I thought he was going to be. So, good news for him.
Well, this is what Verline needed to do, wasn't it, last year? It was kind of completely beat Ericsson. This is what Leclerc's done this year, and what kind of Verline kind of didn't really do, that well on a consistent basis last year. So definitely good signs for Leclerc. Like you say, you compare it to Stroll, even compare it to someone like Stoffel Van Dorn. Leclerc's had a much better entrance into Formula One and is definitely a contender for that Ferrari seat. Would really like to see that happen. Possibly would also give Giovinazzi a chance as well at Sauber on a full-time basis. I presume Ericsson would probably be retained again. But, we'll see. That's probably one of the last seats to be decided. And let's talk finally about Williams, talking about last 4 points, 8th place in Baku, which was a pretty good drive from Stroll, to be fair. But the only highlight, I think it's fair to say, James Casey, because it's been Williams' worst season in the history, I think it's fair to say.
Yep. And I don't think it really is showing signs of improving either, as you said. Since we've been gone, they had that points in Baku, but other than that, they haven't really been too great. There's the odd track where they seem all right, but then there's most tracks where they seem absolutely horrifically bad, and that can't be helping the morale at the team, because they know that the best they can hope for is kind of getting into the points if they're really lucky, and on a bad weekend it's going to go really, really badly, and that's just totally demoralising, I think. But they're not giving up on the season. They keep on saying this, but perhaps they should stop saying that, because things aren't improving since they've been saying that they're not giving up on the season. So, perhaps they should give up and focus on next year, because I think it's pretty clear to see it's not going to be a good one.
I mean, they've got people, they've got good people, Paddy Lowe, of course. And the drivers, I think like people have said, they're obviously not great, but if it was anyone else, they're not really going to be doing that much better. So clearly, I think the car is the problem. I think, a lot needs to change at Williams. And like you say, not much hope for this year, and probably not even next year either. So it's going to be a long road to recovery for them. Let's talk about Austria finally, and just our kind of predictions for it. I personally think, like I think we've said, it should be a Mercedes track, although the form book hasn't been the best this year. But I think it's a really good chance for Bottas to hit back. He won there last year, and I think after all the bad luck he's had this year, he's a pretty decent bet to be right up there with Hamilton this weekend. Baker, how do you see Austria going? For me, I think it'll be a fight between Hamilton and Bottas.
Yeah, probably exactly the same, although last season it was quite tense towards the end. This track, I think Red Bull have never been that bad around here. It's quite, it's obviously a very tight relatively knit grid most of the time. There is obviously the odd chance that it does throw up a couple of shocks this circuit. I mean, it's no slouch on the calendar. Definitely, you get your fair bit of action for what I suppose you're paying for there. I've added that third DRS zone into this circuit as well this season. So I'm not sure how much of a difference that's going to make. I just think as opposed to momentum, a lot of moves are made into turn 3, so hopefully we'll just see even more. But there does become that point where, I mean, you can kind of sit on the fence and say, well, I mean, like in the French Grand Prix, people wanted no chicane or whatever, and they just wanted that straight. But, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe sometimes it's overly used. I mean, 3 DRS zones around a track that's never really been that bad on overtaking, from what I remember. It's a bit of a weird one, but yeah, like you say, Bottas, Hamilton should be up there. I expect Red Bull though to be a thing, a little, maybe even edge Ferrari. I suppose they could do that this weekend. Home Grand Prix for them. Let's see what they can do.
I think it actually could work. The DRS zones could get some decent overtaking. I mean, there's a detection points for all 3 of them as well. So maybe Casey, that might make a difference. You could maybe kind of repass on the next straight, and with it being most of the track as well as straights, and most of the track is DRS zones.
Yeah, that's what I want to see in Formula One. Is I think the overtakes haven't been too bad this season. There was a few races where there weren't barely any, but it's the fact that one car seems to get past and then there's no repassing. And as you say, that more DRS zones should open that up, hopefully. So we see more battles rather than just drive-bys. So that'd be nice to see. And also the lap times are going to be very quick with another big DRS zone chucked in there, which will be interesting to see. In terms of who I think will do well this weekend, I agree with Bottas, but I'd be interested to see where Hamilton will be, because he hasn't really been great at Austria in the past. Apart from 2016 where he won, he's not had a particularly great past at this track. So it'll be interesting to see whether he has one of his weekends where he's miles off the pace and absolutely nowhere, or whether he can carry on that big momentum that he's got, which is what he should do. And I think it probably will happen. Maybe in the past, he's just not had the best feeling around this track. So, yeah, but I think Bottas will probably be really eyeing this one up for a victory.
I think he definitely needs that as well, but we'll have to see if anyone can break Mercedes' stranglehold on the circuit. I think, like I said, all the races held there in recent times have been won by Mercedes. We'll see if Vettel, Ricciardo, Raikkonen or Verstappen can change that. But yeah, should be a good race, should hopefully lots of overtaking. And we'll see you guys hopefully after Austria when we get a pretty good race. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.